Well, how many pages of it? I don't know, where do people usually sit? Okay. Yeah, so I'm assuming that's. Okay. I'm not sure. I think I'll you know, I'm just slide the lead at least. We actually have Paul. Might have to. Well, you know what's exciting out there? Well, I love the winter, but it would bum me out because you can't even see yourself. I know, I'm very happy. No, I know. There's Jen. Oh, so lucky. Okay, I'll run down and get you. I guess the back door's open. No.
About slide 6.
Oh, the percentage?
Yeah.
I was just gonna mention percentage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's higher. I was trying to be careful how many words were on the screen.
Oh,
I maybe
yeah.
truncated it a little bit too
Sarah
much.
Campbell said that you thought that you liked it. Okay.
All right. Yes, so they've been starting up. They've had some
Have seats or not? Guess I'll wait till. Good evening, everyone. I think we should call to order the joint meeting of the Housing Planning and Development Committee and the Planning Commission, given the fact that we've got a big topic tonight, presentation tonight, and not one but two deliberative bodies, with the desire to hear and thoughtfully deliberate upon an exciting plan which has been in the making for more than 12 months, maybe close to 24 months. I'd like to let me check my agenda here to make sure we're doing this properly. So I think I'd like to turn it over to the Planning Commission Chair, Sean McDermott, to convene the Planning Commission meeting. Mr. McDermott.
Councilman Bullock, thank you very much. Hereby convene Planning Commission for, what is today? It's a Monday, April 22nd.
Earth Day.
Thank you. Earth Day. Yes, thank you.
Do you typically call the roll? If you do, please do as you normally would.
We do, Mr. Boss.
Mr. Sanderson? Here. Mr. Reese? Here. Mr. LaPointe?
Here.
Ms. Gull?
Here.
And Mr. McDermott?
Here.
Thank you. And I'll call the Housing Planning and Development Committee to order. Our roll call is Mr. Baker, Mr. Shackner, absent, though we expect him to join us, and I'm also here. So, so we have a quorum. We have a majority quorum of the 3-member Housing Planning and Development Committee. We're also joined by Councilwoman Cindy Marks, Councilwoman Cindy Streebig, and of course the administration. So we've got one item on the agenda tonight, which is proposed Resolution 2024-12, which would adopt the Madison Park Master Plan. That's the proposed resolution. It's been jointly referred to this committee and to the Planning Commission, which is appropriate and customary given the fact that it's a plan, strategic plan, and that falls within the purview of Planning Commission. Mr. Shackner's joined us. Thank you, Jason. And we also have a presentation from the administration tonight and the County and Planning Commission, who is also here, and thank you very much for being here. Council members, given the fact that we want to hear it, can we forego opening remarks from council till after? Okay, sound good? Good. Mr. McDermott, any opening remarks from the Planning Commission?
Planning Commissioners, any remarks? We're good, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to acknowledge Mayor George. Mayor George, do you have any opening remarks, or your administration? Okay. How about Director Leininger? Why don't we ask you to introduce your speakers, and I'll just make the request that I know there's 30-some slides. I don't want to shortcut any of the content. Although, if we took 2 minutes a slide times 30, that's going to eat up a lot of time, which we hope to conserve for Q&A, deliberation, the chance to deepen our understanding, and we may well even have members of the public who want to speak tonight. So with that preliminary, Director Leininger, could you give us some introductory remarks?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and members of the Planning Commission. First of all, thank you for accommodating a joint meeting. This creates some efficiency, especially for our friends at Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, to be able to give this presentation once and be able to answer questions related to the Madison Park Master Plan at one time. The goal here this evening, Mr. Chairman, as you alluded to, this was referred to City Council. And then referred out to this committee as well as to the Planning Commission. The referral to the Planning Commission is required by charter as a result, because this is a master plan for a park. So similar to how we've handled this with past park master plans, Lakewood Park being an example. Planning Commission's review and recommendation to City Council is necessary in this regard. So with that, we do have, as you noted, we have 30 slides to cover. I do want to say some thank yous and just some general introductions. So this was how long was it? A year? 18 months? It was a year, okay. So this was a year-long process, working with Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, the neighborhood, some stakeholders, also our friends at the schools. I don't know that anybody's here from the school district. Then our internal departments, particularly Public Works, and working through a lot of different ideas and assessment of Madison Park to figure out what the direction should be over the next 10 to 15 years. So this is a culmination of that effort. We were fortunate to receive a grant to help us pursue this effort through Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, where they provided it was basically a technical assistance grant. We provided a little bit of financial support to that, but that was minimal in comparison to the effort that they put forward in developing this plan. So thank you to them. Thank you for the acknowledgement and continue to work here in Lakewood. Actually, a number of the Planning Commission staff are residents of Lakewood, so it was a great opportunity for them to get work close to home here. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of our team members that participated, some are here in the audience today. So we're excited to share the plan with you all this evening. The goal is to answer questions, and if we were able to satisfactorily answer all those questions for you, hopefully both the committee and the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to City Council for adoption of the Madison Park Master Plan at their next regular meeting. So with that, I'll stop for a minute. I'm going to hand it over to, and thank you to Michelle, who's sitting to my right, Michelle Nocta, for leading this effort from the Planning and Development Department. So Meg, I'll hand it to you to introduce your team and walk us through the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Megan Cheney with the Planning Commission.
Ms. Cheney, you may need to hit the button until it turns green.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Can you
Good evening,
reintroduce
everyone.
yourself? Thank you.
Sure. Megan Cheney, Senior Planner with the County Planning Commission. I was project lead for the Madison Park Master Plan. And Sean took care of a lot of this for me. I just wanted to take a minute to recognize the Lakewood City Planning staff. Amazing. Lots of help from Sean and Michelle and Amanda Kramer as well. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize a few people here from County Planning Commission, Jim Sonhalter, Planning Manager, and Paul Triolo, who worked very closely with me on the plan. We also are, our Executive Director is Mary Serby, and she's a resident here in Lakewood as well. I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with her. We also had a great information team at the county headed up by Dan Meany, who worked on a lot of the mapping and information needs. So as Sean mentioned, this began with a community planning grant. The 2022 cycle had 16 applicants apply for this grant money, and Lakewood was only one of only 4 to receive this. So it was an excellent grant proposal and application. And some of the goals that were included in the application and also came about during those initial meetings included responding to the evolving needs of the Birdtown neighborhood and surrounding community, guiding future investments in the park, addressing aging infrastructure, including multi-generational and multicultural recreational needs or addressing those, increasing access and community wellness, and also aligning with the many other planning efforts, recent and ongoing planning efforts that the city has undertaken. So we were met monthly with a number of people within city, including planning, public works, also members from the city schools and the community recreation and education department. And they were really the guiding force. We bounced information off of them, and they were able to provide really in-depth and practical knowledge about Lakewood, about the Birdtown neighborhood, and specifically about Madison Park. So the process that we usually go through during a master plan, really it corresponded very well to the needs of the Madison Park Master Plan. Starting with current conditions, it's really the background research of a place, looking at the demographic and social profiles, as well as the infrastructure and programming there offered at Madison Park. A big part of the current conditions also included community outreach and engagement, which I'll talk about in just a moment. From there, core values and mission, that's a statement of what the community would like Madison Park to be into the future. And then the goals and recommendations are those broad and specific items, the recommendations that it will be needed to reach that vision, that articulated vision. And then I'll talk a little bit about the implementation plan. That's kind of a guidebook for how the community can help implement some of these recommendations. And then, of course, the final document is what's included, what we're reviewing tonight. So the current conditions, very quickly, we set the study area by looking at the walkshed of Madison Park. And we took this half-a-mile walkshed because that's set by the Trust for Public Land, because they've identified this area as the kind of practical distance that someone of any age and ability can take to get to a park. So it has to do with access. So we have taken that outline of a half a mile and extended that along the roadway network. So not as the crow flies, but a much more practical how people get to the park distance. And that thankfully aligned fairly well with 3 census tracts surrounding the park. And from there, we were able to really dive down into census data and look at some of the important demographics, including percentage of children and young children. The study area had a higher percentage of children than the rest of Lakewood. Same with percentage of racial and cultural minorities and limited English-speaking households. That was a higher percentage in the study area than the rest of Lakewood. Green space and tree canopy was slightly lower in the study area than in the rest of Lakewood. So these had very important implications, not only for the way we structured community engagement, but also what we included in our recommendations. So this is just a timeline of the community engagement, and you'll see it started winter 2023 is when we really kicked off this project. And so for that full 12 months period between winter 2023 and fall, really winter 2024, when we completed the plan, we tried to include community engagement during that whole process. But you'll see in that spring 2023, we really fit a lot of community engagement in because that was part of our fact-finding and background research, current conditions portion of the plan. So part of community engagement, there was a dedicated website devoted to the Madison Park Master Plan on the county planning website. And we also advertised different community engagement events and the community survey, as well as different stages of the plan on the website and through social media, as the city did as well, and that was extremely helpful. We also had many stakeholders that we engaged, and we did this through kind of a tiered process. We had a stakeholder committee, and we had a couple of meetings, 2 meetings with the stakeholder committee, and these were members of the community who had really a broad but also a deep knowledge of the Birdtown neighborhood, of recreation in Lakewood, at Madison Park as well, and these included Matt Basenstein from Friends of Madison Park, Lakewood Alive, different members of the Recreation Department, and they were able to provide extremely useful information. But we also had stakeholder interviews too, where we had individuals that had a very focused attention on a certain aspect of the park or recreation that we were able to interview separately. And those included members or representatives from the futsal community, soccer community, outdoor basketball committee, lots of other people, including Grace Preschool, that were able to give us very targeted and specific information about a particular topic. So this was it provided very granular information as well as kind of a more global approach to Madison Park. So some of the common themes, lots of strengths, opportunities were identified, but some common themes were just how well loved this park is, how highly utilized it is. And one of the most important themes that emerged was how important it was for the surrounding neighborhood and for Lakewood as a whole to preserve this unique identity of Madison Park. So we made sure to include that and specific things to really maintain that uniqueness into our recommendations. Of course, things like the need to update equipment, better utilization, and another really amazing thing that was identified in several different ways was how appreciative people were of the cross-collaboration as it came to Madison Park across different sectors of the community. And so we made sure to try to keep that, to maintain that kind of cross-collaborative spirit in the recommendations. So we also tabled at different community events, piggybacking on events like the Madison Courts Block Party, the Birdtown Picnic, and the Lakewood Community Festival. During each stage of that, we were able to present more things. At the first May engagement, we advertised the community survey. At the Birdtown Picnic in June, we asked for additional feedback in terms of strength and weaknesses to see if they had anything to add to some of those stakeholder identified strengths and weaknesses and ideas. At the public meeting in October, we were able to present the draft recommendations for feedback from the public. Community engagement, we had an amazing response to the community survey. Over 1,000 respondents. That's pretty much unheard of. Everyone was jealous of us working in the office because really no community gets over 1,000 respondents to a survey. So, and you'll see that those are sprinkled all throughout Lakewood, not just those residents there around the park, but really all over. And we advertised this survey on our on the website, and also at the park, at the library. A huge uptick occurred when we had Mark Walters send out a blast to all the parents at the school system. So it was a great community help with that, and a great community response. So some of the survey results, very quickly from a very high level. Some of the most desired improvements to current amenities included, the first one was Beck's Pool, then the playground, the basketball courts, desired new recreational amenities, a splash pad, nature play, a volleyball court, a skate park. Desired future programming included a farmers market, concerts, festivals, and desired supporting amenities. The first one, more shade and trees, water features, community art. So it's one, amazing that there was a lot of consistency between this survey and previous surveys, and it really highlights the fact that this is a place for community, that people want to enjoy the park as a place to build community. And then the last thing that I'll touch on with community engagement is the school outreach project. This was a really wonderful experience that we had. We wanted to work with the nearby schools, considering how heavily utilized the park is by the youth, and considering how many children are in the study area. So we worked with Harrison Elementary and Padre Pio. And we spent all day at each of these schools and visited each classroom. The kids were presented with 3 different boards to provide feedback on, including what they like most, what they like least, and what they want most. And I'll show you those boards in just a second. So the kids were given each 2 stickers per board to indicate those various topics. And you'll see we left one blank for the what do you want, and we had some great fill-in responses that made their way into the recommendations. So you see, we included this because it highlighted how eager the kids were, so excited to be asked their opinion. They were also, so the results of this exercise largely echoed the community survey, which was also encouraging. What they liked most was Beck's Pool, the playground, the futsal court. What they liked least was the community garden, the picnic pavilion, basketball court. Now, what's interesting is we drilled down a little bit and found out more about why they didn't like those areas, and it came to access and levels of comfort. The community garden they didn't like because when they were playing ball, their balls went over the fence and they couldn't retrieve them easily. So it had more to do with the placement of the community garden. In terms of the picnic pavilion, something that was very important that came out is that they did not like, that's a place where the older kids hung out, and the younger kids on the playground would hear the older kids swearing. And that was really upsetting to them, very upsetting. And likewise, basketball court is a little bit farther removed, also older kids, so they felt like they couldn't access that area. So those were all really important things that we made sure to address, or tried to address in our recommendations. And then what do you want most? This was wonderful because tunnels, who knew? We didn't realize that tunnels were quite as popular as they were, but we were able to get very granular in our recommendations because of this exercise. And then they were also asked to do, were given a worksheet and asked to draw their dream park. So this was great. There was the amount of specificity here really impressed us. You see the zip line, swings, obstacle course. Another thing that surprised us was the amount of kids that referenced the running track or a pathway. Specifically, they said, we want something with trees and nature around it to help us calm down. I was very impressed. And then you'll see the more zip line, and the site planning is really impressive. I think we see some future landscape architects in the students at Lakewood Public. And then just the creativity. There's a snake slide right there, and right there next to the unicorn or horsey, I can't tell which, but you'll see a sign with graffiti X'd out. It highlights that graffiti, much like the swearing, really upset the kids. So taking all this community feedback, public engagement, research, we were able to craft a mission for the Madison Park plan to ensure that Madison Park remains a critical community resource that encourages social, physical, and mental health to all who wish to visit. So that was kind of our guideline, making sure that we stayed true to the mission of the plan. And then within this, the vision emerged of the future desired state of Madison Park, and that the vision is that Madison Park is a fun, inclusive, community-centered park that provides high-quality, innovative infrastructure and programming to all populations in a strategic, equitable, and conscientious manner throughout the year. And I know that's a mouthful, but these were all things that were expressed over and over and over again, and we wanted to make sure that Madison Park represented all these things. So within that, there were core values that emerged, and we kind of plucked these out to represent independently, because these were words that kept coming up over and over and over again in all the goals and the strategies and the action items. And this includes innovation, to incorporate innovative and forward-thinking structures and practices in every aspect of Madison Park. Accessibility, to ensure that Madison Park and its facilities, programming, infrastructure is accessible to all people. Sustainability, not only in terms of ecology, but also it gets back to that forward thinking, making sure that it's desirable in the near future and the long-term future. And productivity, that goes back to the utilization, the heavy utilization of the park, but also the need to optimize places, not only in terms of recreation, but also in terms of ecology, seeing if there's some marginal land that can be better used, like with pollinating gardens or rainwater capture. So the recommendations, within them, there are kind of three tiers of recommendations, going from broad goal statements or categories to more specific strategies, and then very detailed action items. And these all reinforce that vision. So the goal topics that are here, there are 5 goal topics, broadly speaking, including existing facilities, new facilities, supporting amenities, programming, and infrastructure and maintenance. So just to pluck out a few examples, this is kind of the spread in the master plan for each goal when we're introducing a new goal and goal statement. So for example, existing facilities, ensure that existing facilities in Madison Park continue to be of high quality and good condition, and that updates are reflective of the current and emerging needs and interests of the surrounding population. And then you'll see in that kind of dark green box are the different strategies assigned within that goal. And then those strategies, you'll see those kind of numbers in the bubbles, then correspond to the map on the opposite page, so we can see exactly where those strategies are pertinent. And wanted to highlight so this is the strategy for the playground, ensure updates to the playground represent the desires of the community and are inclusive, accessible, and innovative. There you see some of those core values again. And wanted to include this one because it was such a priority as expressed among the kids and among the community survey, but also highlights how specific we were able to get because of some of those community engagement outreach projects that we did, including a zip line, a gaga pit, increasing increasing the variety of slides, having a motion play device within the playground, and also including some of those suspended tunnels and zip lines that the kids referenced. Also, to investigate down there, investigate ways to reduce the incidence and impact of graffiti. So really trying, otherwise we wouldn't have known how impactful that was. And so here we can try to address it. So for new facilities, introduce new facilities that will complement existing facilities and will accommodate underrepresented and emerging activities and interests. You see that number 2 there on the northern end of the southern parking lot. I wanted to highlight that because the Crackshot team there at City Planning is already working on this, securing funding for this particular recommendation. So including the consideration of the establishment of a permanent venue for events and activities to be held at Madison Park. So this was highlighting again the desire that the community expressed to have more places for community events. And also from feedback from that stakeholder committee meeting, we talked to the Chamber of Commerce and said it would be great if we could have it a little bit easier to have these kind of community events, have a structure that where people weren't so dependent on a nice day, have it electrified for vendors in case there's food being served. So vendors and other people tabling wouldn't have to haul generators back and forth. So, and then the last example was within Goal E, infrastructure and maintenance. So that goal was to continue to include infrastructure that is accessible, sustainable, and multimodal, and that will encourage opportunities for new programming and community events. So you'll see within that, that goal, there was an opportunity to increase access on the eastern portion of the park into Birdtown on Halstead Avenue, where there's a land bank lot and the house is not able to be fixed up. So that provides a way to increase access for Madison Park and those residents surrounding that eastern portion. So the city is already underway in that planning process and funding this Birdtown Neighborhood Connector to help increase access. And it's right there by Harrison Elementary. That way the kids coming from the school won't have to go onto the busy Madison Avenue and can go straight through. So, and then lastly, we wanted to make sure that there was an implementation matrix so that this plan is implementable, and this provides that guidebook that I referenced earlier. So for each action item, a priority was assigned, high, medium, low, based on information that we got from community engagement, a time frame, immediate, 0 to 12 months, 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10, 10 plus or ongoing. And then a cost was assigned, with the lowest cost being 0 to 50,000, and then the highest cost being over $1 million. And then we also identified potential partners that the city can work with to not only add input, but also help with funding these various action items. And I believe that's it. That's the plan in a nutshell. Are there any questions? I'll be happy to go back to any particular slide. I hope that wasn't too long.
It was wonderful. Thanks for your presentation.
Absolutely.
Before launching into council member questions, I want to invite the public. If you want to speak, we'll do our best to get you. Sign in. We have one public comment already submitted electronically from Mr. Will Niebauer, who says, Madison Park is the cornerstone of Ward 4 and a tremendously important public asset. The proposed improvements will serve Lakewood residents for years and improve the quality of life for everyone in the area. Thanks. And we have 2 more speakers. You know what, maybe if we could just take those now to make sure that we don't miss out on the opportunity to hear from the public. We've got even more? Okay, so we have several more perhaps beyond that. Let's see. I got to refresh my document. Okay, so Mr. Matt Bixenstein, you want to quickly come up and say hello? I'd like to see if we could keep it to a minute and a half, something like that. That'd be
Absolutely.
great. So could you please say your name and address for the record?
Yes, Matt Bixenstein, 2069 Clarence Avenue.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm here representing Friends of Madison Park. We're a group of neighbors, volunteers who advocate on behalf of the park that's literally in our backyards. And when this plan first came, when Megan brought it to our attention last spring, we have a 6-member board of directors. We had a meeting, and we came up with our 4 key priorities. And they were to bolster the tree canopy in the park, to improve the park pathway, which from our surveying is the single most used amenity in the park, as far as dog walkers, runners, strollers, cyclists, et cetera, to improve the existing amenities in the park, especially the high-traffic ones, namely the pool, playground, and futsal court, and to add 1 new amenity to the park. And I can say with confidence that this plan checks all 4 of those boxes. And I really want to commend the city and Michelle and company, and the county and Megan and company for all their due diligence. We witnessed a number of times just how much transparency and how much surveying and focus groups they've all done in the last year, and we really appreciate that. With a park like this, it has such a multitude of users and folks who, you're never going to please everybody with every single aspect of the plan, but we can, walking away from this plan, we can be pretty confident that it's going to help ensure that Madison Park remains an exceptional asset for our community, for all populations in our community, for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and I want to acknowledge your leadership. You've even got the jersey on right now. Friends of Madison Park, you're a key leader in that, driver and enthusiastic neighbor and cheerleader for the community, period. And you served Lakewood Alive for quite some years before moving on to bigger and better things. So we appreciate your leadership here. And then Miss Mariella Markham Collins. Sorry if I'm not correctly pronouncing your name. If you could join us and please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Marseille Markham Collins. I live at 2045 Clarence Avenue, and my husband and I own 2 houses here. And I guess my main question, I'm so excited, I'm really excited about the park, but a lot of my concern lies with the traffic and the new crosswalk. I'm just wondering if there has been anything decided about the Grace crosswalk or intersection. Right now, as most of you might know, is on Clarence on Madison. The crosswalk there is something called a Hawk crosswalk, and in my opinion, it's not very safe. And I'm just wondering if the Grace crosswalk will be similar, or will they? I don't know. I just kind of want more information on that. So yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And at Marseille, boy, I didn't even come close, so my apologies for that. Okay, so let's be sure, everyone, to spend some time on crossings, access to the park, safety thereof. That's a big concern and focus for the city and for city council members, so I appreciate your points. And then really briefly, we've got 2 other public comments that are in the electronically submitted. I won't read them word for word, but Kathleen, they're all supportive. Kathleen supports public space, highly attractive, usable places where people feel safe and welcome. Glad that the city intends to invest. And then Nick Township is supportive of the plan, especially for the plans to build a bike park / pump track, which will be fantastic for all ages. And he goes into some detail, calling out the success of the Metro Parks, which has had success with the recent build-out of Cleveland Cliffs Steel supported bike park on East 49th Street. I call that out because we've got 2 members of that team, one here and one there. There's a lot of interest, and we heard that in the presentation. Why don't I quickly do a few preliminary remarks. And so Megan and other members of the County Planning Commission, thanks for your work. We certainly do know Mary, who also was a member of the Architectural Board of Review, if I'm not mistaken, for some years. So she's worked with us intimately. So great plan, great methodology, great public input, interesting demographic data. I was perusing through that recently. I noted that the #1 draw continues to be the playground, which maybe needs to be expanded to appeal to all ages, not just the little kids. I think we have the right principles informing the plan, good systematic delineation of amenities into different quadrants, so they're layered, prioritized, and sequenced, and then we've got that in the implementation plan in a thoughtful way. So I think this all will serve as a solid foundation for improvements to the park for some years to come. I've got some feedback I'll hold for the moment to share about prioritizing amenities more in certain places and get clarity on several points. I also have questions, and maybe we could start with this for the administration. How will this document be used? Is this plan a floor? Is it a ceiling? Is it set in stone? And I know the answer to that is going to be no, it's set in colored ink. But that's expensive too and not easily changed, especially when we bind it and print it. But once established, whatever gets adopted and approved, are there opportunities, let's say in 2 to 4 years, as we get into some of this work that's quite exciting, could we refine, adjust, or enhance the list of amenities as called for in the plan, or not? How does that work? Anybody who would like to answer that?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll start, and certainly others can add in as needed. So, a couple things. First of all, this is a master plan. So this is a little bit lower level than the big idea. We've taken the big idea, now we put it on paper and said, okay, these are the big ideas for this park. Here's how we think we can implement these, and it's a long-term vision for the park. So this is over 10, 15 years. If we go back to even Lakewood Park and use that as an example, that plan, I believe, was first adopted in 2002. We made some adjustments, we made some refinements, and we continue to do that. We just did with the waterfront access and thinking through and adding a little bit more context and clarity to what waterfront access can look like in that park. So it's always evolving. Yes, things can change over time. There's also going to be a lot more detail, a lot more study that has to happen with this document. The crossing at Grace is an excellent example of that. What we heard is that people want to have more accessibility to the park. Not that there isn't accessibility along Madison, but it's at the edges. It's not at the front door where people want to generally go, which is with the pool and the main pathway, the main spine that comes into the park. And so it made sense to put something like that on paper, but there's a whole bunch of other study that needs to happen, from traffic analysis and pedestrian warrants that have to be met that we need to dive into. But this kind of sets that framework and says, this is what our goal is. We'd like to have more pedestrian connectivity into the park, or whatever it is else that's in this plan. We want to have more of this, or we want to save this or change this. It gives us that vision to move things forward, and it is ever changing, but it's a living document, but it gives us that path forward over the next little bit. So.
Yeah, and that said, we're always happy to amend down the road. If there's a particular section that you guys would like us to change, that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, thank you. I think what's behind the question, and I'm partly asking for myself and partly is, on behalf of the community, is how do we know that this document will get us what we hope to achieve at the Madison Park, and will it work? And if I see something missing, am I missing my chance for the next 15 years to get that thing included, whatever it may be? So it's kind of an opportunity cost question, and I frequently ask those kinds of questions from a council perspective. Certainly, we can do annual updates, and we can do every 5-year looks or 3-year looks and updates. But those have a cost to them. And so we prefer to get it, right in the plan, if at all feasible and possible. So I think that's what we're talking about here today. And rather than ask a glass half empty question, I'll kind of reverse my own line of reasoning here and say this is a glass half, it's a platform to help launch a bunch of planning, fundraising, engineering design, and then eventually implementation work, right? So if we didn't have the plan, then a lot of things that we have to actively do and create probably are less likely to happen in the next 3 to 5 years so that we're constructing and making continuous improvements over the next, call it 1 to 8 years, right? Something like that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You know, and it's been the trend with funding sources and grants to help with implementation. They want to see an adopted plan to back up what the community is proposing, and this gives exactly that. And to your earlier point, it's always kind of a balancing act with these master plans. You want to provide a breadth of topic area so that as a community evolves and the implementation, the strategies are tweaked, that it still is reinforced by that plan, but also offer specificity in terms of those action items to give the community not necessarily a rigid step that you have to do or a rigid number of items that you have to accomplish, but a guidepost of what could be done. So again, there's that balancing act between allowing the broad vision and goal areas, and then also having those practical examples that are involved in the plan as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Council members, we want to hear from you. We don't have any ground rules between the Planning Commission and the council just yet, so let me quickly interject. Chair McDermott, would it be okay if we had a little round of questions first from council and then hand it off to the Planning Commission?
Please.
Or do you have a burning question right now, especially on the process or the use of the document? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me open up the discussion to other members of the committee and then all members of council. Got Mr. Shackner, Mr. Baker on the committee. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Chair Bullock. And you know, what strikes me about this plan is, you know, love the history, love the demographics. You know, this is a park that's been around for basically 100 years, and I think what the planning and the outreach showed is that it's improving upon kind of what's there, right? So there's a lot of activity packed into this park, and it's there are neighborhood parks in Lakewood, and there are what I call like community parks, like a little bit bigger. I mean, I'm on the west end of town. You know, my son and I rode bikes. It takes 10 minutes, so it's pretty close. But I guess, you know, from the standpoint of like what we can improve on, what we can do, I did one thing that was very interesting is having my daughter play on that playground just last week. It is kind of scary because of sight lines and like fences, and you can't kind of contain them in that area. And then there was some discussion of that internal community garden and how it's kind of plopped there, and it's in between like two high kid usage areas, right? So you have futsal, playground, and then the larger soccer field. Now, like kind of what I envisioned, if you expand that playground, you would then kind of use that area and kind of have like a big kid area to the north and like the little kid area to the south in between the futsal courts and the pool. And then, you know, there's some extra green space on the southern part of the park for, you know, adding on to the community garden. Is that kind of what that's what I'm seeing in the master plan, but I don't know if that's exactly right. Is that?
Yeah, I think all those things you mentioned are addressed in the plan, and then yeah, definitely if you look at that map along, it shows an expansion of the playground, and now that's kind of looping around the western side of it, but I mean, it's a conceptual plan, so definitely park expansion. There's also an action item to investigate putting a fence around the playground, because that's something that we heard from parents, is that they were nervous about the proximity to the parking lot at the library, and it was a concern that was also echoed by Naomi Schifrick, who runs the Grace Church preschool, that she said we would utilize the park more often, even taking the kids across the street if it was a little bit more self-contained. So definitely. And then there's wiggle room. You see that kind of wavy blue that was meant to represent the splash pad. So all that area that's subject to, as Sean referenced, diving deep into engineering plans and grading plans to see where things can go, where things should go. So again, a lot of these things that are represented in the concept plan are conceptual, meant to spark ideas, and there's a whole feasibility analysis that goes along with that.
Thank you. And the last comment I'll have, and this is, I think, just parks in general in Lakewood, is, you come to the parks with your kids, you want them clean, safe, accessible. And this is a multi-generational, intergenerational park, so you want all those things. But then also bathrooms. So there are bathrooms here. I think we should do everything we can as a city to make sure they're open as often as possible. I understand that's, there's, heat issues and winterizing and those types of things, but we were there last week for soccer practice. There was thousands of people at the park, and the bathrooms were closed. So it just kind of creates a challenge. So I would, I certainly commit myself on council to work with administration to see what we can do to make sure those bathrooms are open more often.
Thanks, Mr. Baker. I don't know if the council staff who controls the screen, could you call up page 75 of the full plan? Because that'll have the same map, but with a little more detail. If that's possible to do, that'd be helpful, I think.
This is the
That's,
presentation
yeah,
we'll have to pull.
I understand, yeah, but on the full master plan on page 75, you've got the full map. If we can't, then we can certainly work with this. Other council members, Councilwoman Marks, your Ward 4, and this park falls within your ward.
Thank you, better. It's so vital to the neighborhood. And I know that some of the changes would be very much welcome to the whole community and certainly for the neighborhood. I just am concerned of how long will it take for for us to see some progress in the development of the park. I think you've engaged the kids, which is wonderful, because if they're engaged, they're going to take pride in the park as well. So hopefully with that pride, they'll take care of the park, and they'll be very watchful of what's going on in the park. But I don't want them to be disappointed thinking that we're creating a park and then it stalls and nothing happens. So I'm eager to see some progress so we can keep the kids engaged. I think that's very important. I do have a question. In this, I'll go back to what is 1A?
1A would be, so goal A is the existing infrastructure, and then within that A1 is that first strategy targeting the playground.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So we tried to orient those by goal and then by the strategy associated with those.
I just thought maybe it was like a dirt pit that they could play in to go get dirty.
Yeah, so that's the playground. If we need to change the graphic on that a little bit, we can do that.
But I think you've done a great job to pack a lot into, I mean, it looks like it's a big area, but when you look at all the things that are going into it, it really is not, there's
Right.
not that much space. So
Right.
thoughtful planning is very important, but good work. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. And I have to hand it to my colleague, Paul, who did an amazing job with these maps and the graphics.
Yeah,
So
I
he
think,
did
I think it's great.
just an amazing job, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I can hardly wait to be spending more time at the park.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Other council members? Councilwoman Strebe?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Bullock. And thank you, Ms. Cheney. This is very impressive
you.
work. Thank you to everybody that's in this room that had anything absolutely to do with this. This is really impressive. I had one very specific question, one very specific concern and a lot of questions surrounding it. If we could talk a little bit, if you could tell me a little bit more about the pump track, specifically what type of target age group you're looking at for that, and what kind of anticipated noise levels we're anticipating. I'm looking at it being like right in somebody's backyard on Halsted Avenue, and I'm concerned that even though if it's targeted to a younger age group, that eventually when the 13, 14, 15-year-olds take it over, that it might be causing some distractions for our neighbors on Halsted Avenue. Thank you.
So I'll start, and then we can jump in. We'll tag team again, Meg. So your point about noise concerns was something that came up in the public comment process, and we actually made adjustments to the pump track as a result of that. The idea with this amenity and with all amenities in the park is that they are for all ages and all abilities. So just as we're doing with the skate park in Lakewood Park currently, we want to make sure we're starting at the entry level, someone who's just getting started in BMX and wants to go and experience the pump track, all the way through someone who's maybe more advanced. It's probably not going to be for your pro skater or your pro riders, but at least someone that's more advanced, and so they can kind of get that full spectrum. And we want those age groups to commingle together as they do at the skate park. We want them to commingle on these amenities, and so we're trying to make it as broad as possible, but certainly recognize that the point about noise, because that did come up in our public comment process.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering about the placement of it, again, with its proximity to Halsted Avenue, if it might not be wise to look at possibly putting it near Athens Avenue, where the gardens are, where there are no residents that are living there, and put the gardens over where it may be just a flip. There may be something to consider there. I'm not sure with the other features in that area if that's possible or not, but just to be considerate to our neighbors there with that type of noise that might be occurring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And, just to address that, we had that kind of looping down along the eastern side of that southern parking lot, so even closer. And actually, the residents her backyard backs up on that southern parking lot, was worried about that as well. And we talked to her right there at the public meeting about shifting it, so just that little edge was kind of brushing up against those Halsted residents' backyards. And she said that would be much better placement. And one thing I will say about a pump track is that it encourages continual linear motion rather than grouping. So that's something that hopefully will help prevent kids from congregating in one particular area and causing a lot of noise. But yes, I think that's definitely something that we can discuss. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But do you have a? Mr. Schachner.
Just on the noise, looking at the history of the park, it was purchased by the city in 1917. Playground equipment first installed in 1921. Skate house added in 1925. Baseball and softball diamond was lighted in 1949, and the city pool was constructed in 1957. There's something in the law called coming to the nuisance, and I think when we're talking about noise concerns and people living close to the playground, close to the park was there. It comes with the territory. So I know it is a concern, but I would hate to minimize or shrink some of the amenities at the park and playground that is for community use due to an over-concern for noise and nuisance when the playground, for the most instance, was there before many of the residents were there.
Thank you. We often get principles of law and from the historical perspective from Mr. Schachner. We appreciate that. I suppose the launch point hangout for the beginning of the pump track could be the center of the park rather than the perimeter. But Councilwoman Striebeck has an interesting point. Couldn't you swap the community garden location with the pump track? And you're up against industrial use to the south. I don't know, but I appreciate the dialogue on this. Councilwoman Keppel.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you for being here, and thank you everyone that was involved in working on this plan. It's very exciting and very positive. I had a couple questions regarding to the point of infrastructure and programming, and that anything we put in there is only as good as we can maintain it, essentially. So to Councilman Baker's point about the restrooms, that's something that we continually are working to improve access to, and I noticed there was a point about connectivity. Is that talking more about connecting the trails so there's a continuous path, or connectivity also in terms of Wi-Fi and that type of access, or is that just really more about the paths?
Did we, you know what, I can't, it sounds familiar, and I think, did we include stuff about Wi-Fi?
There was, I think there was a reference to it, but it
reference,
wasn't
yeah.
a specific, like, we need to.
We didn't focus on it.
There
yeah.
was talk about Wi-Fi and also as it relates to security, so expanding our camera coverage. But yes, to your point, when we talked about connectivity, it was primarily physical connectivity within the park itself and then to the adjacent neighborhood.
Yeah. And I think that's important to think about that in both aspects too, especially looking 10 years, 20 years down the road and the type of programming that can be happening in the park and those security cameras is, when we first were talking about doing a lot of this work, it's sort of, proactive community safety of thinking about creating a place and creating community. So it's public safety in a different aspect with that programming. I did want to ask about the maintenance buildings. Is that primarily for caretaking equipment, or are we also thinking about, I noticed it was close to where one of the potential public use spaces would be, so would that also be, we've talked some about creating maybe a way to keep, chairs and tables, tents, equipment that may be used for, Taste of Lakewood or whatever events that are happening. Is that kind of some of the thought process there?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, also in terms of storage, but also for maintenance vehicle, I guess the current maintenance shed, there are some issues with height. So the thought was not only to better accommodate those maintenance vehicles and different machinery, but also there was also a comment that sometimes in doing the regular maintenance vehicles go along the trails, which of course, but the thought was also by shifting it off to the side as well, there would be less conflict with park goers as well.
Great, thank you. And then there was I remember some comment being made about the possibility of imitation turf on the soccer field, but I think there was a kibosh on that, right? I don't see that in the plan anywhere, but I just want to make sure.
No, there was a pretty good discussion on that for a while. And then the thought process is trying to find, certainly with grass turf, there's only so much use you can get out of it before it becomes a mud pit.
Yeah.
And that's what we were hearing, some feedback from the users of the field, whether it was from St. Ed's, because the rugby team, others utilize it too, even just the community groups that utilize it. And so one of the things we talked about and had a pretty expanded conversation about is, should we look at converting this to a artificial turf field, so then we can utilize it year round. But that comes with its own trade-offs. And so ultimately we decided, look, the important thing is let's just get this to be the best field it can possibly be as a natural turf, and we'll go from there. But certainly that's something we could consider in the future if it is needed. But right now it's natural turf.
For what it's worth, I'd prefer not to consider it in the future myself. But, and then the pickleball enthusiasts out there would have my neck if I don't ask about. I noticed that there is a potential multi-use court. What's the conversation around pickleball here?
I think pickleball, because there are dedicated courts at other areas, and because the residents are so close, the thought was that pickleball can be played at some of the other parks around town. And the thought with the flex court was it could be, because there was talk again with the older kids playing basketball, that could be more of a dedicated space to do half courts for younger kids. It could also be a backup for futsal playing. So that was the thought.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thanks. And then finally, I just wanted to ask real quick about, were there, because we had the February 8th draft, were there, you talked about a few of the things that were adjusted based on feedback. Were there any other really notable things that, given that feedback between the February draft and this version, that we should note?
I don't believe so.
No, I think the edits that we made between that draft and this version were really some more graphical. So some of the split out and some of the slides that Meg referenced was just making it more user-friendly or more readable for anybody to be able to pick it up. I think, but there wasn't anything of substance or change.
Correct, yes.
Specific items within the recommendations.
I think one of the project team members noted that wanted to call out accessibility for the pool locker rooms a little bit more, so we included, I think that was one of the only text updates that we included, and that didn't impact the action items. It was part of the backup text where we explained the action item a little bit better.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly try to talk through some of my feedback because we got to get time over to the Planning Commission. So some wonderful new features here. I love the potential running track. I don't know that I see it here anywhere, though.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Where is it, E4?
So it's a loop trail through the park. It's not a specific running track
Okay.
like when you think of.
Well, but there's images in there of
Right.
like a 40-yard dash somewhere,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, so we highlighted, on one of these slides, it's highlighted in red to just to signify that it's been adjusted to kind of
Okay.
skirt the perimeter of the park a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's thought to the flooding that happens at a number of spaces. I think that's E4. Right now, I think what the rendering shows is bioswales. That certainly can be good if they're community rain gardens, that kind of thing. I think it'd be even lovelier because one of your call-outs showed surfacing a stream. I don't know what the terminology is, but I think Lakewood is a series of streams that got buried over and diverted into drain pipes. In theory, you could do more than just a bioswale, perhaps,
Yeah.
on I'm guessing, the western perimeter, but I don't know if that's called for really directly in the plan. A couple of other points. So shade and seating maybe doesn't get fully called out in this graphic rendering. That's C2 and C3, but I think that should be everywhere throughout the park. And I do know the verbal description says put seating, areas of interest where there could be shade, but that is some of the most important stuff that you can do for a park. It's a place to sit, it's a pleasant place to sit, and it's shaded. Maybe some of it's in the sun, but it needs to be shaded. I was just at a playground at a city that I won't name, but it starts with an A and it's in Lorraine County, and it had no trees. And so they had these giant sails, and there was no effort to put up any trees, although they did have a wooded section, which was very nice. But it was woods over here, playground over here. It was all hard structures. You know, it was very nice equipment, but the design did not integrate those things at all.
Yeah.
I think in Lakewood, we've done a better job of that over the years, and we need to keep at it. And I think there could be, you know, that should, wherever I love the call out for extending the walking trail so that it's a loop. But all along there, you could have shades, shade areas. Trees are better than shade structures, but we'll take shade structures, and there are some there now in the playground area. There's another thing to call out further. Public art should be C5. I guess it's really on E3. There is no C5. I would like to add C5 to a bunch of different places.
Okay.
I do see that the plan calls for E3. These gateways are a great idea, and there's multiple gateways, and the plan calls for them to be artistic gateways. That's great. Those are going to be higher expense, and you got to design them right and install. But we have a public art plan and a public art committee in Lakewood that's been doing some wonderful work. For a modest amount of investment, we can have a continual flowering of art. And it doesn't all have to be institutional, giant, sculptures. It can be lighter touches. Some of that exists already at Lakewood Park. One of my favorite pieces is there's bike parking, where there's kind of a mosaic treatment of the ground it's a little curved area. It's just a little beautiful spot, right? And so I think you could breathe life all through here. But right now the plan calls for at least the gateways, but not much more than that. And it also doesn't start until year 6. So to me, I think we should move that up and emphasize it a lot more. And beyond that, I think we work with, the Friends of Madison Park, the neighbors, the Public Arts Committee to figure out how we do that. But I would just love to see us continue our investment there. Storybook Trail, it's called out. It's not written out in any one spot. It says throughout the park. Right now, we have a commitment from the library and city council to do the first leg of that. In my mind's eye, that's got to be close to the library at first. Maybe over time, you could get it all throughout the park. I'm glad that Councilwoman Keppel added Wi-Fi to the list. I missed that one, but in any well-attended, when we're successful at programming, and I love the fact that the plan calls out for programming, you by definition crash everybody's ability to use their phones. And these days, we really shouldn't be on the phones in the park, but it is how you find your family member. It's how you find where you're going to run your next errand. It's just a practical tool, so we do need to plan for that. That's a feature of usability. My two major questions remaining would be farmers market location and not failing to invest in the basketball court area. And I think this plan is currently written under invest in the basketball court area. There's a lot of activity that's good. E7 is the new storage structure. You've got electricity to E6. That's very useful. In fact, I think we should add electricity to the two existing shelters, one by the playground and one down where you have B6, the new volleyball court. Those two existing shelters should probably have electric service. That'll enhance usability too. But back to the basketball court area. So there's a lot of energy up by the new Halstead entrance. Then you've got a B2 is going to be this new permanent outdoor shelter. Love to learn more about that. But then nothing's at the basketball court area. And I think by intention, I think we want activity there, right? We want natural activation of the space. We want to layer uses. And there's a user group that's been doing that by hauling all their stuff 6 times a year. And then they pack it up and they haul it back. And that, I think, is unsustainable level of commitment to ask for volunteers who are paying out of their own pockets for most of these expenses. So what I would prefer is that some of this activity around the north end of the southern parking lot be moved to closer to the basketball area. Or you move the basketball court up there, which I don't know is desirable or workable. But right now, I think we're missing an opportunity. There's a lot of Lake Erie Screw Factory activity that's planned, and that is immediately across from that area, and we could meet them halfway across Athens Avenue, and beyond that, I'd lean on you planners to do your magic. But right now, all of the action is pulled away from that spot, and I don't want the only people going to the basketball court to be just the players, just our community parks ambassadors, and a few times a year the barbecues that we are able to have our volunteers do. But somebody's going to move. They're going to not be able to do it one summer, and then it's left underactivated. Yeah. Last point on the farmers market. From experience with our Detroit Avenue Farmers Market for some 10 years, we know that farmers markets work best when they're at a place where there's a lot of volume and traffic. And if it's going to have a spillover effect on the Madison Avenue merchants, like I think we want, it's going to have to be close to Madison Avenue. So I don't know if we've gotten that far, but to me, you'd be looking at right in front of Beck's Pool next to Madison Park, or over on the northern entrance E5, where people could come and park and just be right up on Madison Avenue. Now, if the thought was that B2 all the way by the baseball diamond is going to host, or the community, the existing shelter south of the futsal courts, that's a different model. Maybe that can work, but those are not connected to anything else in the streetscape. So to me, I think we've got a couple different frontages for the park. You've got the retail end up north. You've got neighborhood entrances on the south and now going to be on the east. And we want to be thoughtful in how we make whatever we're investing connect successfully.
Yes.
For that. And that's my application to be a planning commission appointee. I'm probably out over my skis on trying to borrow planning. But anyway, I'll stop there. We probably don't have time to give feedback on all that stuff. Thank you for the chance to talk through some of that feedback. Why don't I turn it over to the Planning Commission? Mr. McDermott?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. With that, if we could open it up to commissioners' feedback, comments, questions, we'd really appreciate it. We could just open up generally or go down the line if you like. Ms. Gall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great presentation. A lot of work went into this. Thank you. Appreciate it. I guess I'm just curious about the Birdtown Neighborhood Connector a little more, the entrance on Halsted. It sounded from the presentation that maybe it's closer to, that property being handed over to the city from the land bank. It could happen sooner rather than later, but then not till phase 3 is the actual entranceway kind of introduced. So, I'm not sure if it's administration or, Ms. Cheney, who can maybe speak to what happens between that sort of phase 1, phase 3. Is there a reality where it's open just kind of as a lawn entryway, or is it really waiting until a proper, accessible entrance could be constructed?
So this is a property, the 2048 Halsted is a property that the city took possession of in 2020 as a result of some abatement work that we did to remove some nuisances from the property, I think in 2015. It finally worked its way through sheriff's sale and ended up in, it's the city's land bank is what it is. We investigated for a little bit of background, we investigated for some time about how can we invest our home program funds into that home and turn it into an affordable housing unit. Unfortunately, as we got into it with the amount of repairs that are needed, especially in today's environment, it's the cost of the repairs are probably going to be pushing $450,000, and that's using some real-world numbers from another home that we just redid, as well as another one a developer did that we sold to him. So that would take up more than a year's worth of our funds, and so we decided that's not probably the approach to go through. As we went into this planning process, we heard more and more from the residents about connectivity, and so this became a natural thing to consider. We were successful. As a result of this, in that planning process, we started to put the idea to paper. We were successful in attracting $50,000 from the Cuyahoga County through the CDSG grant, which is casino funds. The city also budgeted our own funds in this year's CIP to try and make this a reality this year. The goal this year is to do more than just tear it down and have a lawn gateway, and maybe it's not a 3-phase process. Hopefully it can be probably a 2-phase process. What we'd like to do is get the home removed, get it down, make the connection, put up some fencing, landscape, and other things that we need to do to create that gateway, get a sidewalk connection at least to the park. Our goal is to get beyond the park and either get to the north parking lot or the south parking lot, whatever is feasible. There's a pretty good drainage swale there we have to work with. But we're trying to explore some different options of maybe even looking at alternative surface materials, at least to help us get something in right away to help make that connection possible. And so we'll hope for that, and Michelle's leading that effort as well, so hopefully that'll happen here this year as well. Sorry.
Mr. Sanderson?
Excellent work. It's a great plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanderson, your mic may not be on.
You can't hear me? Just taking after Councilperson Marks. Really my only comment, and this is just from some experience, but for the most part, the park is really isolated by Madison Avenue on the north. And I would like to think outside the box and, perhaps a road diet, gore the entire area, change the speed limit, put a chicane in, anything that makes that more accessible. Because, while there's a lot of people that live in Birdtown and to the south, there's a heck of a lot of people between Detroit and Madison that you take your life into your hands getting into that park, and especially if you've got kids on bikes. And that not only goes for the face of the park, but also, the crosswalks a couple blocks down, and because those streets don't always line up, it gets to be really awkward. So from my perspective, from a public safety standpoint, I'd like to consider that as part of what needs to happen to improve the plan, and that, again, may be kind of a separate, not necessarily the park plan, but something that would certainly improve pedestrian life, and including for the pool, for the library, for the school, for, pretty much multi-purpose there. Other than that, great plan, great work, and thanks for the opportunity to preview it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll make sure to revisit the tree canopy and the planting and make sure that's a theme throughout. And just so we tried to introduce that as many different areas, but I'll definitely take another look at that and make sure that's a theme that runs throughout every single goal.
Mr. Reese?
Again, just want to echo everybody that it's a fantastic plan. I had a great time listening to you explain it and everything, so having a lot of fun looking at it. I'm also very excited about that connector on the land bank lot. I think that's going to be really cool, especially for the elementary school. I just quickly mapped it. It cuts the walk from about 2,000 feet to about 500 feet from the school, so that's awesome. But one thing that I do through the park is when we come through Athens, we'll ride our bikes north, trying to get to the bike lanes on Lake, and there's not a good way to get through kind of like those really nice sidewalks along Madison to get across, even if you are going to take your life in your hands to cross at that spot. So I would like to see like some kind of maybe thought about what the entrance to this park looks like from Madison, specifically like around, not that I drive to the park, but that the entrance to the parking lot off of Madison, when you're running along Madison, is a pretty awkward place to transition, especially when you're headed west. And maybe there's a good reason for maintenance trucks or something that intersection is designed as wide as it is. But more of a front door to the park would be nice. And then I am going to be very excited to see what that crosswalk looks like across the Grace. So
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Mr. LaPointe?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We'll jump on the bandwagon here. Thank you for all your great work. Echo what Mr. Sanderson said related to looking also at Madison and how Madison could potentially pivot and or change. I think there's some opportunities there with the existing right-of-ways and potentially things like road diets, and those things that could also expand how the adjacent businesses and other things interact with the park from the north side, and using the park as kind of a backdrop. And then also to the south, and as we think about lighting and safety, some of those things, not only thinking about lighting and how it could be used for safety, but use it as a potential art piece. And the screw factory could be a backdrop to that to the south.
Yeah.
Some of those things came to my mind as I was listening through the presentation, so thanks.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, lots of potential.
Thank you, Mr. LaPointe. First of all, thank you very much. You guys do incredible work. So I think we're very, very lucky to have you and the capabilities of the County Planning Commission. So thank you. Just a few quick notes, and not to repeat anything that the other commissioners said. From the park standpoint, I know that growing up here, not in Lakewood, but would come to Madison Park to play soccer as a kid, and it really is it's a window into the community. And I think we need to remember that we've talked a lot tonight about how the residents use it and how Lakewoodites use it, but we have a lot of people coming in from across Northeast Ohio for travel soccer and other uses, and we need to remember that we have to keep things in a first-class manner. So I like that you have maintenance shown. One of the very first key focuses of the plan. It's crucially important. The one thing that I think a few of us picked up on is we're actually talking about a reduction in parking. And with what we're talking about for the event, what we're showing in B2, what thought, and we're not saying it's good or bad, but just for the record, what thought went into the parking aspect of the park? Knowing that we want people to walk, we want people to ride their bikes, but the truth of the matter is people will still drive here.
So the thought is that by situating that new pavilion that was an area that was originally the basketball court, and then was reclaimed as additional, or was modified to be additional parking. So just kind of reclaiming that area that wasn't there, wasn't parking 10 years ago. There wouldn't be that big a reduction actually in the parking, and by pushing that towards the northern boundary, it actually wouldn't impact parking all that much. There would be a loss of, I think we discussed how many spaces, like 10 to 15 spaces. And then we've attempted to couple that with looking at and collaborating with the Screw Juice Factory even more to make sure that overflow parking during various events or sporting events, they would be fine with absorbing that overflow.
Great.
Yeah.
So as, in effect, a consultant here, do you feel that there's, especially in the full build-out scenario, do you feel that there's enough parking in the park for a normal day? Not an event day, but a normal day?
Having been up there, I live in Lakewood, my son plays soccer up there. The parking lot towards the south is rarely full. And I have been up there on warm summer evenings when the basketball court is in full play, where there are people playing soccer, where there are lots of kids on the playground. And I think there was a really concerted opinion from the residents that they did not necessarily, they wanted to maintain it as a neighborhood park. Yes, they recognize that it's a citywide and even a regional draw, but it's a very important green space for that community, and they want to make sure there's as much green space preserved as possible,
Great.
even with these extra amendments. So.
Great, thank you. Just a few more questions. The softball field. When you look at the master plan, the softball field consumes an inordinate amount of space, and it's used, and it's fenced. Who programs the softball field?
The rec department, yeah.
And because it's the rec department, are those mostly Lakewood citizens playing in those leagues? Or I know it's open to anybody, but.
It's a mix.
Was there any consideration given to, and I understand there's safety considerations here, taking the outfield, the home run fence out, so the field could be used more? I mean, there is no open space in this side of town.
Right. So I think that was oh, it just disappeared. So there, we show on those two sideline, in the left and the right field, 2 openings. So the thought is to really maintain those, have those gateways open for use of that outfield, and make sure that those are open unless they're playing a game. Maintaining the home run fence around, I think, is a very important component, and also extending it. What we heard from a lot of basketball players was that they regularly get bombarded when there's a softball and baseball game being played. So the city, I believe, invested in making that fence a little bit higher right there, but balls still get over. So one of the recommendations was to increase the height of that fence around the back, but ensure that there are openings that are very visible, so people know that during off times when a game is not being played, that's space that can be used.
Right.
We also heard from the community garden folks about the impact of baseballs and softballs leaving the field. And the ball itself can do some damage, but it's really the people then going into the community gardens to retrieve, causing damage. And
Mashed
so the
potatoes?
fencing became a very a very important thing as part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We're just glad you considered it.
Oh,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. The pump track, because it's come up a few times, whether it's a skate track, pump track, it's in a tough spot. And it's right at the goal line. It is in the foul ball, if that is the small softball field or whatever it's planned for the southwest corner. How much consternation went into where that got placed? I know you talked about neighbor noise, but we are jamming a lot into this park, and
Yeah.
that is tough.
So the thought is that it wouldn't go horizontally along a bunch of yards on that side. I think there are drainage issues on the other side. That where that B6 is, that was identified as, I spoke to the amount of racial and cultural minorities that visit the park and live in the area. That is an area that was identified as being very important. People go there and play pickup games of volleyball and cane ball. So we wanted to make sure that's a very utilized portion of the park. We did not want to kind of confiscate that area. So again, this is a conceptual map, and that it looks big. So it might be that the pump track is reduced in size, or shifted. I think, again, this is a conceptual map. The thought is that maybe since that will be a mix of age groups, that would maybe correspond better to be located closer to that event area and to the basketball and the softball field, where there are more adults and teens, rather than considering the feedback we heard from the elementary school kids who tend to visit the playground area more. That was the thought process in locating it there. Yeah, we recognize that that's a lot in that area, but also you have to remember too that, the soccer field, it's very delineated here, but it's not quite as delineated in real life. So there's more of a sense of open space when you're actually physically in the park than kind of what it looks like here. So.
Great. When it comes to the soccer field, and I know there was discussion about synthetic versus natural turf, this is communicating, it's reading as synthetic. You've got 3 sports on there. So if we're going to portray that it's going to do all these things, then it certainly reads as synthetic. So we may want to revisit how that looks.
The intention wasn't to show synthetic, it was just the intention was to show multi-purpose. That's what it was.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, reading through the data, and you guys collected a whole bunch of data, and thanks for the engagement piece. One thing that struck me personally is 38% of those who responded saw safety as a barrier. That's a hugely high number. I don't think that's the reality. I truly think that that's a perception issue. And does the master plan talk about marketing, communication, things of that nature? Because that number is not good.
You know, we didn't touch so much on marketing and communication. We did talk a lot about making sure that lighting was ensured throughout the park, and that there's the park ambassador program is wildly popular. The kids like the park ambassadors, so we talked about extending that. What were some other aspects to the safety?
Was lighting really defensible spaces, just taking some design cues, just what we went through a year and a half, 2 years ago, actually maybe 3 years ago, with some issues that we were dealing with at the basketball court and how we addressed some of those. But to your point, no, there's not specific conversation about how do we market the park, but it is very much more of a physical in nature document, speaking about those, creating sight lines and those other items that are important for safety. With lighting, say, security cameras, expanding security, I think I mentioned earlier, expanding the security camera network within the park itself to make sure that even there's always some eyes on it, whether it's an officer, whether it's the ambassador, whether it's any other type of park security, or just eyes back in the dispatch center so people can see it, or we have the ability to go back and see it.
Great, thank you. Anything more from commissioners? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good discussion. So we have 2 entire minutes here, and Councilwoman Marks needs one of them.
Thank you. I just want to add to something that Mr. Sanderson spoke about as far as traffic. Since May Halls now has the Roxy, and I live on Grace Avenue, and Grace is a very busy street. There's a lot of speeding on Grace. And so there is a lot of traffic that comes into Madison right off of Grace because of the gas station, because of the Roxy. And really, when the Roxy is having an event, there is not one parking space available on Grace or at Madison Park. So I think that is going to be an important issue to consider from a traffic safety standpoint and kids accessing the park. Just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. We tried to be cognizant of project creep, but also very aware of the safety issue as people cross Madison, and that's definitely something to consider, expanding that recommendation around the crosswalk and the means to access the park.
Okay, thank you. I know the administration's interested in getting this plan approved. I thought, highlighted a number of pretty detailed and thoughtful areas for continued dialogue. What I'd like to suggest that we do is that we talk informally, we continue the conversation and understand a little, get a little clarity on a couple more of these questions, and also, part 2, understand whether some of the feedback that we shared tonight might be reflected in a variety of ways in either the notional or the conceptual map here or the implementation plan. For example, maybe there's some public art that could be timed earlier than that middle band of planning, for
So
example.
adjustments to the implementation table.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I don't think anybody's interested in being dilatory or delay, but I do think we've had some thoughtful dialogue from the city council side and the planning commission side. I don't think we need to meet as a joint group again, although it's always charming and lovely to see all of you. So perhaps a path forward would be we can do some communication in between meetings and come back. This committee is going to meet again in 2 weeks on May 6th. We already have a meeting scheduled. We could also potentially meet in 7 days on April 29. But probably we prefer not to do it that way. So May 6th might be a target opportunity, you know, for the Housing Committee to talk again. Any feedback, council members? Thoughts? Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Chair Bullock. I'm comfortable, you know, as a committee member, you know, recommending this to full council, but certainly understand if there are certain things that you want to work on. But we also think about planning commissions, you know, what they want to do, whether they want to or recommend approval or not. So.
Yep, I understand. Planning Commission, you want to handle matters?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we get some feedback from commissioners on any thoughts on how to proceed.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lapointe.
My instincts are, as I'm comfortable advancing or moving forward. I think the dialogue was good tonight, but I don't think nothing that is going to substantially kind of change the critical mass here, but I will defer to other opinions.
So thanks, Mr. Chair. I think we have concurrence here. Question is specifically, are we referring, are we approving as submitted with recommendation to council? What is being requested?
So you are recommending approval to city council. You can recommend approval as submitted. If you want to attach conditions, you can attach conditions, but you're recommending approval to city council.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion for recommendation either with or without conditions to city council?
I would like to make a motion that we recommend approval by city council and to take the discussion tonight and continue to incorporate that in the plan as it matures and moves forward.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Mr. Lapointe, any discussion? All signify approval by stating aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for city council side of things, my hope is that we'll come back in 2 weeks, May 6th, and either have a similar motion or a slight version of, a slight adjustment or reflection of the feedback in what's presented to us. The legislation, what it says is, the proposed legislation that the Planning Commission just recommended says the Madison plan, the master plan for Madison Park is generally attached, is hereby adopted. So as generally attached gives some ability to do what Mr. Sanderson just included in the motion, which is to incorporate the discussion tonight into the refinements going forward. So that that's a good process. Seeing as we're 4 minutes over, I'd like to bring this to a close. Okay, so without objection, Housing Committee is adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we'll take maybe a 5-minute restroom break and let Director Leininger get set up for our next meeting. So thank you very much.
Hey, Colby and Brent, if you can hear me, we're switching meetings right now, so just sit tight. You're on a live mic in a room with a lot of people, so just sit tight and we'll be with you in a second. So I didn't even share my screen with them. I don't even need to do that, do I? I'm just showing, I'm just showing. They have some images they just sent me, so I gotta pull those up. It's not slides, it's just a slide, or site plan and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna have to share my screen. They do. Yeah, let me open it first. Hey, Brent and Colby, we're going to do a mic check, see if you can hear me, and then if you could just say hello so we can make sure we hear you. Hey, can you guys hear me now? I don't know why. Hey, Brent and Colby, can you hear me now? For the speakers there is, but not for... Can you still hear me? I just changed the settings, so I'm just trying to see if you guys can hear me. If I need to go back to the old one.
I can hear you, Sean.
Yep. All right, good. All right, we can hear you, so good. Just put it on same as the system.
Council members, if we can head back up, I think we've got a connection. All right, we will call to order Committee of the Whole for April 22nd. First, I'd like to move to approve the minutes of the March 4th meeting without the necessity of reading. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. On the motion to approve, all those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes. Okay, so the first thing up is an update, very exciting, long-awaited update from the Planning Department regarding the proposed downtown development. And Director Leininger, if you want to kick us off and introduce who's on the phone with us here.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So joining us virtually today, Brent Sobczak and Colby Turnock with Casto. You've all met them in past meetings. Well, I apologize, Mr. Eby, you have not met them yet in past meetings. So Casto is, of course, our developer that we've been working with for some time now on the downtown site. I'll give Brent and Colby can have a chance to introduce themselves to you as when they have an opportunity to speak here. But they'll be joining us, and I'm going to give some overview and some introductions of where we are, and then I really want to hand over to Brent and Colby to let them give you, so you can hear in their words where we are. There's probably going to be some questions, or perhaps there's going to be some questions and some answers that you would like to have that we may not be able to answer in the open session. If that's the case, I believe the agenda is set up for executive session, that we could go back and entertain some of those questions in executive session. The goal is to have as much information as possible out on the open session, but we also recognize that, as you're about to learn, Casto is working with a tenant for the site, and so they have some responsibilities and confidentialities that they have to keep and maintain, as they have in past conversations that we've had. So let me maybe back up, and then I'll start to go forward. So we'll go back to September, and when we met back in September of last year was the last time we actually sat and had a formal update on this project. If you recall, when we met at that point in time, we were talking about how we can move this project forward in light of changes in the occupancy of the site. That was after the office user had decided to go elsewhere with their building. We were also experiencing a lot of very significant and substantial changes in the debt and equity markets during that time, and have continued to see that change since then. From that meeting, what we discussed exploring, what Casto discussed exploring, was a phased approach to the development site. And really what that meant is, how do we break this up into smaller chunks that would be more palatable to financing and equity markets in order for Casto to secure the necessary financing to move it forward. And then introduce the products into the market in a little bit different phasing pattern. So before, we were talking about this really as all of, in a sense, it's always phased, but it was going to be one sequential, one purchase, and then really start on building sequentially, starting up the garage, the office building, the Curtis block, and one of the residential buildings, and then kind of working our way around the site from a construction standpoint. By a phased approach, what we talked about doing, since this was a $100-some million project in its entirety, is how can we get this broken down into smaller chunks, say $30 million cost, that there's still some appetite in the debt and equity markets to help support. And so we were looking at really taking the garden apartments that were at the southern end of the site. How do we get that moving forward? Probably looking at some type of temporary parking, other things, because the garage didn't make sense to take on $14 million of cost for a garage for a handful or 70 apartment units. And that's where we kind of left off and said we had the blessing of council to kind of move forward and let's study this a little bit more, and then come back much sooner than what we are now. But there's reason for why we've taken a little bit longer, more deliberate approach to this. Come back to you once we had that figured out. Along the way, as we walked away from this table, or these tables, back in September, along the way we were re-engaged, or Casto was re-engaged, with a potential tenant that expressed interest in the site previously, but simply just couldn't be accommodated for a variety of reasons, primarily that the office user and their needs for the site. But we're re-engaged by them, and we had some back and forth conversations with Casto about what does that mean, what does that look like, and as we started to have those conversations, we started to get really excited about the opportunities that was being presented to us. Some things that we hadn't thought about before, but still, as we'll talk as we get a little bit farther into, still accomplished all the goals that we were trying to accomplish as part of this site. So this tenant is a grocer. It's a grocer that offers smaller, mixed-use neighborhood markets that really serve local urban communities like Lakewood. I know a lot of people want to know the name of that grocer. That's not something we're ready to share at this point in time. That'll be up to Casto and the tenant to decide when they want to, when they're able to share that, when they want to share that. But with a smaller footprint, and what we're talking about is a 30,000 to 40,000 square foot footprint, and that's a single floor. Compared to more typical suburban grocery store, that can be really a minimum of 80, and then for some of the superstores can get up to 200,000 square feet. The neighborhood market concept that we're talking about with this operates very similar to a boutique grocer. And that really fits well within Lakewood and our priorities for the downtown site. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But generally, just so we're on the same page about what neighborhood market is and what they do, Neighborhood markets they still offer a wide assortment of merchandise. They have fresh meat, they have deli, they have bakery, they have fresh produce, and they have both national name and value brands generally. In this particular grocer, they're renowned for carrying thousands of locally sourced items. And that, by locally sourced, I mean from around the region, I mean from Ohio, I mean from our area. This particular grocer is also, we're really excited about, particularly as we think about the programming of the plaza, and sorry, those are some of my reminders for the next meeting we have set up. The thing that we're really excited about this particular grocer and how they can help activate this site, particularly the plaza, is the fact that they offer educational and community events as part of what they do when they come to a community. They also offer a cafe that takes a lot of those local products and turns them into sandwiches and meals and beverages can be everything from coffee to beer and wine. So we're really excited about what this means and what this can potentially bring to us. I'm excited to share, and Castro can talk a little bit more about this, as they've executed a letter of intent and they're actively working on a lease agreement with this grocer. That lease agreement is very important because that's really the true commitment to the site, and Brent and Colby can update you more on where they are in that process. And so while let me change slides here actually, because we can now bump kind of down to, this is where we were when we left off in September. And you remember some of the massing imagery of what this looked like, where L-shaped building, the plaza was more central to the space and kind of protruding in off of Detroit. The Curtis block, we were working to basically attach the residential building to it and then come over the top of it with some additional stories or a story above, and then the residential off to the behind it. And these are just some sections through so you can kind of understand what's happening with the grade changes through the site and the elevation changes with the buildings and really how that garage is partially submerged into the taking advantage of some of the grades and submerging part of the garage so it has less of a presence on the site. Really to now the site plan that we're going to talk about here this evening. So much of the original site and building design does remain intact. You can see kind of the same basic shapes and forms from where we were. But there are, of course, some changes. So in addition to introducing City Council to the tenant, at least generally, who the tenant is, our purpose here this evening is to at least share with you a conceptual site plan of where we are today. Castle's still knee-deep into this, working with the tenant and with the balance of the rest of the site to understand how this works, and hoping to get in front of our boards and commissions here very soon. But before I hand over to Brent and Colby, so they can walk you through some details, I at least want to share with you and impress upon you, if I haven't already, we're really excited about the opportunity that's being presented here today and moving forward. The addition of a neighborhood market does a number of different things, and I've shared this with some of you that we've had conversations with. It fulfills a market need with a specialty grocery. If you think about our market studies that we've had done, the one area where we do have a retail need is in the specialty food, specialty grocer area. So we are checking a box with that. Really, this use helps complement our existing local independent downtown businesses and the fact that we're bringing someone who does not compete directly with them. It activates the site with mixed-use development that is compatible and supportive of the surroundings, particularly the residential neighborhood. Also with the grocery use, I think this is really important, is we get a use that's going to be open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. Before we have an office user, that office user is generally Monday through Friday on normal business hours, and so we aren't getting that full 24 as much as we want a 24/7 activation of the site. We're now getting that at least a 6 to 10 a.m. activation, and the residential activating the balance of it from there on out, 7 days a week. So we're getting that activation. We're getting opportunities for fresh quality foods. You're also going to see, as we talk through this, it does reorient the plaza a little bit, but it also creates something that we're really excited about, an opportunity for some additional green space down here. And this is not necessarily a result of the grocer coming in, but just kind of as they're considering to evaluate the site plan, creating some additional green space at the southern end of the site to help support the residential neighborhood that's on site. And in our conversations with Casto, also allowing the public to utilize that space within the site itself. And really, then the last thing, and then probably the most important thing, is that we are still accomplishing all of those development objectives that the community had laid out. Seems like forever ago at this point, but all those development objectives that were laid out many years ago, we're still checking all of those boxes. So that's where we are. I'm going to pause for a second. There's some additional imagery behind this that I'll let Brent and Colby kind of walk you through. So Brent and Colby, if you want to unmute yourselves, and then just tell me when you want to go to the next slide, and I'll move on to the next one.
Okay, great. Hello again, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight, and thanks for your patience as we work through this. As Sean indicated, when we were approached by this user, first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we felt comfortable that they were the right user for the site and this project. So we took some time getting to know them, getting to know their operation, and that's when we started getting really excited about what opportunity that there was for this. And then we kind of had to line up the dominoes again on the site plan. So the general theory on the site plan is still pretty much the same, where we're having the density up on Detroit, and then kind of slowly scaling back as we go north to south. But we really had to roll up our sleeves and understand operationally what this user needed. And, first question is, could we fit that? And if so, could we make it all work on this site with everything else going on? So that's kind of where we started. And it was quite a big effort. And for them to be so involved with it so early showed a lot of promise as well. And we got some good feedback from them and from staff that kind of guided us to what you're seeing today. So really, starting at the north side, the building one that is now the mixed-use building that would house this user on the ground floor, fronting the plaza, it was kind of the first big domino to fall. And to use the analogy of checking the boxes, that's kind of an exercise we went through with the user. Can we check all the boxes that they needed to make this work? And the answer was yes. So we got to a floor plan and a floor plate that they were comfortable with, understanding all of their operational needs, making sure that we could align the building to support those needs, and then also, kind of readdressing and rethinking the Curtis block. The good news is, in this scenario, as the dominoes kind of started and the puzzle pieces started getting into place, we saw the opportunity to utilize the Curtis block for something else than our previous plan, which just allows us, honestly, to be a little bit more nimble and a little bit more patient with the building itself. So instead of trying to draw, a Class A, retail user on that ground floor, we now have some amenity type space and leasing office function that we can, quite honestly, probably better work with the Curtis block in its existing form than we would have if we had a restaurant user who would want a wide open floor plate and kind of rebuilding the whole structure. We also disconnected it from building one, which allows us a little bit more flexibility than what we previously had as well. And then on this north side, the last thing I'll say is with the floor plate of the potential user, it gave us more of a true kind of podium building that you see a lot in infill projects. So it gave us this open second floor of the podium, which we did not have on the office building, which then allowed us to move some of our amenity area that we had previously on the south side to a raised deck condition, opening up the south side and enabling us to integrate kind of a pocket park back there, which will be a really nice feature for the neighborhood and for the project. So those are the main changes to the north side. The central part of the project largely remains the same. We had to work and understand the parking needs of this user, as well as the parking spaces that are already encumbered on the site for the clinic, and then what our residential needs would be. So the parking garage, I believe in this version, has grown a half level from where we left it last time. And we had to rearrange the entry that comes off Bell now instead of kind of the service court. So there are some minor tweaks to the site plan in the central area. but it is largely the same. And then the southern third of the site, and this is kind of the real exciting change back here, it really remains the same. We essentially just pulled that middle garden building back, and it still allows for a nice mew space between the for sale condos and the garden building to cut east-west through the site from Bell to Marlow. But it also gave us great opportunity to have more of this passive pocket park kind of in the middle of the neighborhood. And, this is something that will be much more subtle, much more quaint, and not as heavily programmed as we've always discussed all along with the plaza up on Detroit. So it looks like there wasn't a lot done, but a lot of the heavy lifting was up front on the first building, trying to make sure that we all were comfortable not only with the user, but that we could fit them into the project in a meaningful way without any negative impacts on the rest of the project or the neighbors. So this is where we are today. And Sean, I think there's some other images in the back that should, there you go, that have the massing. So again, still kind of following suit from the previous site plan of holding the density on Detroit and then kind of stepping back as we get into more of the single family residential neighborhood to the south. And then these are just some images that show the massing in the cut through of the sections. And then I think we have the last images are more just showing, again, we still have a really good plaza space that is now fronting on Detroit and the Hart corner, and then we still have the Curtis block and this ground floor user kind of really solid anchors to activate the space. And there's a lot of exciting things that we've already been discussing that we think will be very positive for this plaza, and the users super excited as well. And so these are just kind of some images that you had seen previously that we redid for the new configuration of the plaza. So you can start to get a sense of the massing of that first building behind it, the opportunity with the storefront glazing that fronts on the plaza, and all the things that can happen there. And these are some of the event type conditions that we showed previously. And while the reconfiguration makes this more of kind of a rectangle instead of running east-west instead of north-south, we still have the flexibility to have variety of programming and different events in the plaza space. And then this is just a first initial look at the pocket park. There's a lot of things that this can be, and certainly looking forward to hearing feedback on what this can be. And we talked about several different parks in different urban locations, and there's a lot of good inspiration out there. But we wanted to get something in this set to give you an idea of how meaningful this can be. And it's a good sized pocket park. And also the muse space, which is in the upper left-hand corner, that runs between the garden buildings and the townhomes. Again, just kind of softening that border and really creating a nice link east-west. I think that's it.
That's the last one, Colby.
Yep.
So unless Colby or Brent, you had anything else to add, or I'll ask anybody else, Mayor or others, if there's anything else to add. We're happy to answer any questions that City Council may have.
Great, thank you. Open up to council members. Councilman Bullock.
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair, and to Planning Director Leininger and Casso and Mayor George. There's a lot of wonderful features, great renderings. I in particular like some of what you're showing on this slide. So my two questions are, how do we read the front plaza? Just want to make sure I understand. And then really my real question is, how firm or not firm are these plans at this point, and what specifically? I don't know that we're hearing a question today posed of City Council just yet in a formal sense, but I want to make sure I understand just kind of where state of play is. On this slide, so the central, I think it said resident amenity deck. So am I looking at in the middle here? Am I looking at the roof of a single-story grocery store, which is, there was a nicer term than I just used, market?
Yeah, that would be this will be a podium building, so we'll have a concrete podium that will house the ground floor user. And then on top of that podium, on top of that podium, you'll have the amenity deck and the residential overbuild, which is the U-shape building above.
Okay, so what's a podium building? I'm embarrassed to have to ask. Number one.
So it's just it's a concrete structure that gives the ground floor user the clearances and the distances they need to program their space, and then it also acts as really kind of the foundation, the floor plan for the residential above.
Okay. I think I follow. And then the residential amenity deck means that's the private area accessible for community events, or not public community events, but residential access only. So if I were to live in Building 1, there would be entryways for me to get to that essentially very large balcony, or a little bit like Lakewood Center North across the way has the same idea, a few stories higher, I think. Is that right? So the concept here is you're adding a private amenity that's attractive to the tenants in Building 1, and beneath that, that's the location of the proposed market.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And keep in mind that amenity was provided in the last plan, but as Colby noted, it was at the back of the site behind the garden apartments.
Okay, and thank you for that. I think I welcome the creativity. Want to put some thought to the corner plaza / the public square. We've had a ton of discussion about that. Not sure what I think about it, other than I'm glad that we're going to be thoughtful that there is space. I guess I'd love to understand, is that more or less space than before? It's good news about Curtis Block, and I do agree, Kobe, with the rear margin. The alley connecting is a nice feature, and it's soft. It's not on this slide, but softens the edge. I thought that was really thoughtful and welcome. And the pocket park, I'm sure, is going to be also very welcome for a bunch of reasons. Thanks.
Other council members? Councilman Baker?
Thank you. Yeah, and first time we're seeing this, so I take a little time to digest. Can the administration send this to the clerk so we can absorb it a little bit more? Because I'm comparative too, right? And not only from our perspective as a city, but also just the public. I think based upon some of my old notes, and they're on old, notebook paper, but we had about 230 housing units in the previous plan. Now we're up to 330 roughly. Yeah. So the residential unit count went up by 100. So these are some of the things I think as we develop in this conversation, it'd be nice to have some side-by-sides. And to Councilman Bullock's point, I think it'd be helpful to, I'm a real estate person, I think just sheer acreage. So like the acreage of the publicly available space in the previous plan, the acreage of the publicly available space in this current plan. I'd like to understand the pocket park, whether that is seen as a residential amenity for the folks that live there, or is that a community amenity?
Community.
Okay.
Both.
Excellent. And then understanding, I think there's a lot of work for the Planning Commission and ARB on kind of that back of area or Building 1, and kind of how it interacts with the rest of the site, that loading unloading zone, safety there, traffic going on Bell mostly instead of Marlowe, which was a little different, I think, from the previous plan. So those are all just more comments, and I assume that leaving the Curtis Block alone opens up the developer to be able to get historic tax credits, which maybe is an equity source. Not really? Okay. And then to timeline, to the extent that the administration or the developer, where are we at now? What does this look like for the rest of 2024, assuming council agrees and passes everything and planning commission agrees and passes everything really quickly?
So I'll leave the schedule to Brent and Colby, because they have taken some time to work that out, especially as they're working with the grocery tenant to provide them some expectations on what they can anticipate moving forward. As far as your other comments about some comparatives, yes, we need to do that comparison. We're starting to do that now. We're working really kind of in real time with some of these drawings as Casto updates them. Yes, the unit count is, so when we left off before in September, I believe we were estimating the unit count was probably going to be around 310, 315. And that was a result of taking all that, just taking all that office space and converting that just into units. So because of some of the efficiencies and just some of the scale that we're able to create with this revised drawing, the unit count's now up to 329. I think we feel pretty comfortable that it's probably about where it's going to be, pending some just unit type massaging that happens through their internal process with studios versus 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and we've of course have talked about 3 bedrooms in this at some point. The plaza space, yes, it is absolutely smaller than what it was before, but we're also picking up a lot of green space that we didn't have in the site at all. That's now going to be public at the south end of the site. Haven't done the math on that. Just visually, it feels like there's more here than what there was before, but we need to do that math to confirm that side by side so we understand where we are. I think beyond just the quantitative side, though, we also have to think about the qualitative side and how that space is used and interacted with. Where is it located on the site? Because before we were having conversations with Planning Commission, ABR, maybe a little bit with City Council about the southern buildings. Really, everybody has to go to everybody to the north has to go to the south to utilize the amenity space. And now we have a little bit more balance in the site where, granted, the people at the south don't get the pool, but they have a community space, they have their own space that they can utilize. And then Castro's got some really great things that they're thinking about doing to program that Curtis block and make it part of the residential space itself, but still very much have a presence on Detroit with how they finish that out with some of their amenity co-working space, however it is they end up deciding to use that. So there's a little bit more than just a quantitative analysis that we need to look at as well. So if I miss anything, Colby, Brent, jump in, but then on the schedule side, I'll hand that over to you. But yes, the time is of the essence, but they can walk into that.
Yeah, from a schedule standpoint, I think our goal would be to move forward. We have discussed with Sean and staff about a potential joint meetings with Planning Commission and Architectural Board of Review to introduce this site plan and where the changes are, and then probably immediately followed up by a Planning Commission meeting for the revised preliminary development plan. Kind of in our pre-construction tracking, we envision this working through those entitlement approvals through, end of third quarter of this year. And there's various reasons due to the debt equity market that Brent can touch on and that Sean alluded to that we feel that time is of the essence.
Afternoon or evening. Just to jump on that, Colby, our plan is to hopefully get an executed lease within 30 to 60 days with the tenant. We're trading drafts back and forth right now. We've got enough detail to kind of kickstart the public meetings, but then we're going to try to be on a path, an approval path as quick as we can to hopefully get started in 2024, but that is the plan.
Thank you. Just one more comment, if I could, Chair. The exciting, and I think, and I'm still processing this because it's the first time we've seen it, but I think you have to interplay the fact that we may lose some of the public space along Detroit and Bell, but you're effectively gaining 40,000 square foot of public space as a user because you can enter the grocery store, whereas before it was a closed-off commercial building. One thing I think we have to be thoughtful about in the city's development agreement going forward is grocery tenants love to have the ability to basically just like let a space go dark so that competitors can't come in them. And we saw that happen on West 117th on the Cleveland side with Giant Eagle. So I think the city has to fight really hard with our partner, the developer, to make sure that we have good assurances that we don't have in 5 years 40,000 square feet of empty, unactivated space down there, which I think the developer wouldn't want either, but the city certainly wouldn't want either. So thank you.
And if I could, if I remember correctly, I believe in the council priorities, we talked about dark boxes and making sure that we have some protections in place to prevent that. It does happen. I live in Avon Lake, and we have a dark box there where a grocer left a number of years ago, and they're just paying the lease on a 10-year lease. So it's not good for anybody.
Thank you. All right, Councilwoman Strubig.
Thank you. I'm excited to hear that public meetings are coming up. I'm looking forward to a little bit more detail with some information on the truck traffic, and especially with a business that's going to be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and what the delivery schedule for the goods would be for our neighbors, especially on Marlowe and Bell. And if we could get some information from the grocer on when they are anticipating. You know, you hate to hear that beeping truck backing up at 3 a.m. in the morning when you're trying to sleep, so maybe some detail on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yep, Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I forgot to ask previously. If I read this correctly, there's the one and only retail in this rendering is the 40,000 square foot market, and there's no, or could there be maybe in the Curtis block, depending on how things evolve, other retail?
So I'll defer to Colby and Brent, but it's our understanding that yes, right now the only retail that's shown is the 40,000 square foot grocer, pending whatever Casto decides to do with the Curtis block. But right now we're assuming that Casto is going to retain the Curtis block in its entirety for their purposes.
And what about the rest of the ground floor on Building 1? That's just residential?
The entire, correct me if I'm wrong, Colby, the entire ground floor is that entire outline is the grocer.
Correct. There is some ground floor lobby space for the residential above. That's pretty minimal.
So the entrance to the grocer could be from the public plaza to the north, but also potentially from Bell and Marlowe or the rear?
Correct. There will be multiple entry points, and then they kind of have a back front door from the garage, where Sean's indicating on the plan right there, that we've already started working on some of the detail with them on that area.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
A few of you have touched upon this already. This area right here has been the biggest challenge for us to figure out, this loading area and how do pedestrians, everybody intermix, and so we're still working through that. The idea, though, is if we can moving some of the access points around. I think somebody mentioned that there was not a direct access to Marlowe before. Everything was coming essentially off of Bell, whether it was direct or indirect. The only way to get to Marlowe was out the backside of the garage, and then to Marlowe was out the backside of the garage and over the private street to get there. But this has been the point of that we've been working back and forth with Casto and then Casto with the tenant to figure this out. But the idea right now is really kind of creating this space that's just for their vehicles and then getting the pedestrians, because we have residents and shoppers commingling in this area as they exit the garage and as they come in off the stairs down into a lobby space, but still working through some of the details on that space.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, the white patch just south of the Curtis block is or is not accessible for pedestrians to walk through it. I think it says mechanical systems.
Colby, if I'm right, that's for this.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That'd be part of the store's mechanical systems. So right now we have kind of a screening towards the plaza side. The ground floor directly behind the Curtis block is a residential elevator lobby. So that area would be closed off from view and access.
So residents may have access, but not the public. That, I think,
Just
is
to this
the
part.
precise spot where the mechanicals were for the hospital as well. Okay, so the current configuration, no office, correct? There is retail, but it's one retailer. And now we have additional residential.
Correct.
And can't recall now, when we lost Roundstone, all the office in the previous version of the proposal walked out the door with them, right? We didn't have other.
No, there was
So
no-
at that point, it was going to be residential and retail, but it was going to be multiple use retail. Now we've got this concept. Okay, I just want to level set what the current proposal is so that we can understand and think it through. Thanks.
Yeah, multiple retail was TBD. I mean, in theory, you could have had someone that came in and took the entire first floor of it was building A in the old rendering. And then someone who took the entire Curtis block. So you may have only had 2 retailers in that point. So, but there was at least 2 separate spaces. But yeah, those are really the kind of the key differences here. But things we all anticipated and we expected as we move forward. Still the same amount of retail as the previous.
Okay. I had a couple of questions. I don't want to get too in the weeds of the plans because I know things are still evolving, but the amenity space, like, I remember talking about it before when the pool was towards the southern end. Now it'll be in the front. Will both the residents of Building 2 and the garden apartments also have access to the amenities on the rooftop of Building 1, or that's specifically for the residents of Building 1?
It would be for all the residents.
Okay. Thank you. And then I had another. So am I understanding correctly that you said you're hoping to have an executed lease in 30 to 60 days, and then that would unlock the ability to go in front of ABR and Planning Commission with plans, and we would, and that would probably publicly reveal this grocer? Are those accurate statements? And if not, correct me.
So, well, they have enough information now to at least, let's do an update with ABR and Planning Commission. That will not include, it'll be a very similar conversation where we just aren't able to share the name of the tenant at that point in time. But then as the process advances, and then I guess Brent and Colby, I'll hand it back to you guys. At some point, I'm sure the grocer wants to share who they are, and we'll be able to do that. But that's really between Casto and the tenant.
That's correct, Sean. So we would introduce them once the lease is executed, but we would start those meetings prior to that with the hope that that gets executed here in the next 30 to 60 days.
Great, okay, thank you. Council members, any other questions that we want to ask during this public meeting? Councilwoman Marks.
Thank you. So if all goes as planned, when would you do some groundbreaking on the site? What's the anticipated groundbreaking date?
I think we're hopeful later this year, early next year.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? So anticipating that there may be some questions regarding other aspects of this, I'm going to move to enter executive session per ORC 121.22G for the purpose of considering confidential information related to the marketing plan, specific business strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements of an applicant for economic development assistance, and to consider the sale of property. And I'll include in that motion council staff, the members of the administration, here including planning department, and the representatives from Casto.
Second.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
are we included, I know there's 2 other things on the docket tonight that involve settlement of litigation. Were you seeking to speak about that in executive session as well, or no?
I'll be seeking to make a separate motion on those items as it relates to a different part of the code and would involve different members of the administration.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All right. Do we do a roll call? Yes. All right. We'll do a roll call. Baker?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Keppel, yes. Marks? Schechner?
Yes.
Strebig?
Yes.
And that motion passes. We'll enter executive session in, oh, we should go in the conference room?
No, we can go in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to head into the conference room. Members of the public who are here, we will probably exit executive session and then most likely enter executive session again for the other 2 items on the docket, so there probably won't be a whole lot more to see tonight, but you are welcome to stay if you wish.
So Brent and Colby, we're going to log out of this meeting and then go to the second link that I sent you, but I have to go log back in the other room, so give me a minute so I can do that.
Yep.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Sounds good.